Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Build America podcast, the construction industry podcast that is capturing and sharing the very heartbeat of construction people, projects, places, and certainly issues, which is something that I'm looking forward to our diving into today. I'm Kerry Smith Buck. I'm your host, and I am also owner of Construction News and Review magazine. And just delighted to have with us today two very dear people who are going to talk to us about an important component of mental health on job sites and mental health in general. Today, we have Dr. Colleen Saringer and Scott Satory with us. Dr. Saringer is, by her own admission, a blue-collar woman wrapped up in a PhD package, and she's got more than 40 years associated with family-owned construction businesses. She's a former organizational health leader now, and she's a professional speaker now. She goes and travels and talks about the essential topic of workplace suicide prevention, which we will learn in this discussion is sadly something that's not going away, but that there are unique approaches to it that are working. And Scott Satory is owner of Service First Roofing, which is an Atlanta-based multimillion-dollar industrial roofing company. And is it okay if I mention how you all know each other?
Yeah.
Please do. It's why I'm here.
Yeah, that will make sense. One is Scott. So Scott, Colleen, her husband and wife, and certainly a strong team in all respects, but especially in spreading the word of today's message, which is going to be that kindness is not just a nicety. It's not just a fluff ingredient. It is a workplace safety strategy for positive mental health. And so looking forward to learning from you both today. Welcome to Build America, Colleen and Scott. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
It's good to be. And it's funny because Kerry, as you were going through the intros, I thought, gosh, we probably should say that we're married. So I'm sort of like, where are these two random strangers doing this?
Yeah. A man on the street kind of thing. And they're both in the same room. So we thought we'd talk. No, thank you for disclosing that. And thank you both for being here. I initially met Colleen through a dear friend who is in the industry in the mental health advocacy world. And then Colleen recruited Scott. Scott, whether you're here voluntarily or not, just kidding. Thank you for joining us today.
It's not volunteer.
It's voluntold.
And there you go. Exactly.
It's okay. It's a good message.
Oh, I believe that it is. And so if you don't mind my asking, just to start with, I know people wonder, especially in these episodes, we're doing a total of 8 on mental health and well-being, specifically on job sites in the construction world. And I have to ask you, I know in the intro we mentioned, Colleen, that you have a long construction family business history, but if you want to touch on any more, and Scott, if you're willing to share sort of the thread that connects you to this topic of workplace mental health, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So for me, my connection really begins as a child. When I was 5 years old, that's when my parents decided to open up their business, which is sheet metal business out of Cleveland, Ohio. And they carried that business for over 30 years. But carrying that business in the construction industry did not come with a lot of trial and tribulations. And so my dad, he was the lucky one. He was the one that drew a lot of the stress that landed him at one point wanting to take his life. So rather than driving, the way I tell the story is exactly the way I learned the story when I was 13 years old, is that rather than driving himself off of a bridge, which is the way he wanted to take his life, he instead drove himself to the hospital. And my mom coined it a nervous breakdown because back then we weren't using terms that were normal hospital terms. We were glossing over it, for lack of better words. So that was one thing. Unfortunately, I learned that. I also learned that you're supposed to stay quiet, a story that many of us have, right? When you find out that someone has this issue, let's keep it quiet. Let's not tell anyone. And that's something that I held very close to my heart and carried it with me for many years myself. In addition to that, which for folks that are familiar with overall physical health and the mental health connection, is that there's a strong connection. And so in addition to his mental health challenges, he also then in turn had a heart attack when he was 48. And again, those two things are connected. And so I share that to say that I watched a lot from both the outside and the inside as just a child growing up in the construction industry by way of family. And then fast forward, I'll turn it over to Scott because I don't want to tell his story for him. But fast forward, I meet Scott. He's working in the construction business and then says to me one day after we got married,
I'm ready to open up my own industrial roofing company. And it really what prompted it was years and years of horrible bosses, not being treated well, seeing the way that's the disrespect that a lot of employees were going through. And then there was the complaints about you can't find good people, but then you always found that the people that were complaining weren't treating their people well. And so I had a constant fear of my job, the day in and day outs, which I'm not alone. Everybody's always experienced this. But when I decided to open my own company, I decided that I was going to try something different and I was going to lead by kindness. And I didn't know that it was going to work, but I don't have issues with employees. I don't have issues in turnover. I don't have issues in calling in sick, tardiness, all that. You have your highs and lows with employees. Sometimes there's not good fits, but it's something I came across that surprisingly worked well. And the work environment is so much better than what I experienced the previous 25 years that I had been in construction.
That's so amazing to me, just to interject that wherever you speak, that kindness is a workplace safety strategy and it works. And I know, Colleen, from your background too, you mentioned how it's protective. It's almost a positive like shield of armor or something for the hazards that in life and in construction that you go through. Maybe talk a little bit about how, and you just did so beautifully, Scott, about how it's a risk management strategy, particularly in a dangerous world of construction. I would imagine people who feel safe and well respected, that's one less thing they have to be thinking about when they're on the job site. Is that true?
They're less likely to take risks, which is really nice. If people are happy, they're more aware of their environment. They tend to get a better night's sleep. I always make sure I want you to take breaks for lunch. And never go into a situation, because industrial roofing, I can't be on every roof all the time. And I always let them know from the beginning, if you ever get into a situation that you even consider a little bit dangerous, stop, call me, don't risk it. And the experience that I had with that in the past is I was inspecting a roof for a company I had worked for, and one of my legs went through and I was by myself. I was about 55 feet off the ground, and it was an old waste management facility that was abandoned. And my leg went through the deck into just dangling. And I remember shaking for at least 45 minutes, slowly getting myself out, thinking that this was before cell phones. Who knows when somebody would have found me, and I would have certainly passed away. And the way that hit me, I was never going to be part of any environment that allowed that. There's nothing that we do a day in and day out that's worth risking your life or worth risking your safety. And because of that, I've had the company for over 17 years and I've never had a reportable incident.
Never in over 17 years. Listen to that, audience. That's just
I'm incredibly proud of that. And there may be some luck involved with that, people would say, but I minimize that luck as much as possible. That's the biggest thing. I'm so proud of that statistic. And you always worry every day that might go away, but we do everything we can to prevent that.
How big is your company? How many folks do you typically have working on?
I've always kept it simple. I have one re-roof crew, because we don't do any new construction. It's all roofing, occupied industrial facilities, shopping centers. And so I run every crew, and then I have 3 service crews. And then I have an office manager that retired a little bit ago. So I've always kept it small and simple and manageable. And when I've talked to companies that are larger, that you can scale that down. The people that manage, or a foreman, can keep their aspect of that manageable as well.
And Colleen, you're out speaking with all kinds of audiences, quite a few in the construction industry as well. I know we're skewing this a little bit towards construction because of our audience, but you're talking to all kinds of groups, aren't you, about kindness and mental health?
Yeah. And I'm pulling in Scott because I really do think that regardless of how you talk about kindness, you need to understand what that looks like in the workplace. And I think he does a phenomenal job at being able to bring it in an industry that's really hard to bring it into, because the work is the work. It's hard. work. The hours are the hours. So yeah, so definitely out there talking quite a bit about it.
That's awesome. And that's a great segue into what does this look like? We mentioned the safety aspect. Certainly, what are other manifestations of kindness on a job site? Because sometimes I wouldn't always think that trait would rise to the top or that would be leveraged in a way that it is a resource rather than a nicety.
You want to go ahead?
The most important thing that I've found is drop the ego and listen. If you sit there and you go up to somebody, don't necessarily go up like without any care what the response is. Don't say, good morning, I need you to do this. Say, good morning, so how are you? And you make sure you do your best to get to know everybody. Like I can tell the realities of it is if I'm on a job, I mentioned that I run every re-roof job, I can tell if somebody's having a fight with their spouse. I can tell if somebody drank too much the night before. It's something that awareness really, it continues on to where the other people that are part of the crew is aware as well. And we look out for somebody. Working in Georgia in July, when it'll be on the roof, it wasn't unusual. There were so many times this summer that it was 130 degrees on the roof. We need to make sure we look out for each other to make sure that nobody's falling out. And the good thing about it is if anybody is hurting or feeling lousy, they know that they're not going to I'm not going to yell at them. The foreman is not going to yell at them. We're going to take it easy. We're going to be smart. We're going to make wise decisions as we go along. And then we're going to come back another day. And so sometimes jobs may not go exactly the way you want due to weather, but that's something that you just adapt to.
And I'll also add, because I think what may not be coming out quite blatantly in what Scott just shared is one of the biggest things for him is that, and this is something that we talk about quite a bit on stage, is that you have to know who your people are. And I respect that someone may say, gosh, my business is big. We have 700 employees, whatever the case may be. But whether you have a foreman, whether you are the business owner, however that looks, you can't recognize anything unless you understand the ins and outs of work, of how your people work. And that way you can tell they seem like they're fatigued. Maybe they smell like they're hungover from the day before. These things are all important. It's life, so that is such a big piece that I just want to make sure is coming out, that the reason that like leading with kindness comes across differently is because you truly get to know who your people are by working alongside them at some point in the beginning, when they first join the workplace, middle, like you don't just do it once and that's it. It's a consistent cycle. And so that's a really important point to call out.
No, that definitely, I think so. And especially in what you mentioned before about historically people held things in and maybe still do. And it's not gosh, you forgot to attach your harness. It's not something that's easily observable, I would imagine, unless you truly know people on the inside and out.
And Kerry, this actually might be a really nice time for me to insert this statistic. So how you said people still keep it quiet. So there is a statistic. It's not my statistic. It's from the National Alliance of Mental Illness. The acronym is NAOMI. And the statistic is that it takes on average 11 years from the time a person starts to experience a symptom of mental health. Maybe they say, gosh, I feel down, but I don't know what it is. I just maybe had a tough day. So from the time they start to experience it to the time they seek treatment, that's a big average gap, which to your point, you teed it up perfectly. They're coming to work, not talking about it. They maybe still don't know what it is because, gosh, I've never felt this way before. So we do have to get to know our people so that we can recognize these areas of opportunity, because that person may be stuck in this 11-year on average window simply because they just don't know.
Isn't that an amazing statistic? More than a decade, and that's the average. So you've got people that are grappling with it half their career.
Yeah.
Longer,
yeah.
or even shorter.
Or even shorter.
There may be, so you have a lot of people I remember when a lot of the military was coming back from the Middle East, and They were dealing with a lot of things that they experienced. And so we were trying to do a lot of hiring in the construction industry. And so what they experienced could easily put them in the 3 or 4 year window compared to 11-year window. But the only way to know that for sure is getting to know people.
Wow. Wow. And I think too, it's not just the individual. Like you said, it could be a family. You have to know them well enough to know maybe their daughter's getting married in 4 weeks and that's
Very much.
it's stressing them out or whatever it is. But it's to know them well enough to know who their support system is, I would think, when they're not at work.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. So this may not be the right order. I'm looking through a couple of bullet points that you were kind enough to jot down, but it says, what made you decide? And I think this is Scott, what made you decide to fire customers? And feel free to jump into wherever that fits. But I know I fired a few in my time, but it wasn't on a construction site.
Was it satisfying to do?
It really was. And actually, the person's PR person said, I'm so surprised you hung with them for that long. And then she left.
Isn't it such a sense of relief after the fact?
Yeah. So tell me about that. If it's a toxic influence on your workers who you're trying to protect with kindness.
So
What is that?
even when you treat people well, it takes a while. It's a locomotive. It takes a while to get going and get your good workforce, to get your good people. And I tried doing the military work fairs. I tried any kind of thing I could find. I even called the city of Atlanta one time, looking like the unemployment office, to find out if they had any workers. And she laughed and said, "Oh, honey, no one wants to work on a roof in the summer in Atlanta." And so it was slim pickings. And so I was watching the people that I had were very good, but I was watching the work that we had. I was starting to worry about burnout. And if you start to overwhelm people, then that's when the injuries happen. And so I decided I couldn't find good people for the work. So I decided to start firing customers that took forever to pay, customers that were difficult. Anybody that's like, for my office manager, if she had to call them 4 or 5 times to try to find out where payment is, that's part of the burden for your overhead. The amount of time that they would take her to try to get, and the mental aspect of it, like knowing that's okay, am I ever going to get paid on this? But more so, what I found was a benefit, and I didn't know any of this was going to work. Really, Kerry, it was all out of desperation. But I found getting rid of the customers, not only the customers that took forever to get paid, but the customers that were just difficult or that were disrespectful to my employees. When my workers would come in and all of a sudden they would see that they had, for my service crews, 3 or 4 stops that day, but it was all the customers that were respectful to them and kind to them, or they would see what their schedule was like the next day, or it wasn't a bad environment, or it was a safe environment, they just felt better. And so you end up having the attendance inevitably gets better. And it's just accidentally, I've done 4 different instances that I fired customers. And initially you're like, oh shoot, did I do the right thing? Because you're always worried about, no matter how much a lot of the construction workers will get paid, a lot of times they won't save. A lot of times they are working paycheck to paychecks. And so you really do feel a responsibility making sure that they have as many hours as they want. And it's scary, but in the long run, it really works out well. And everybody's mentality gets better when you get rid of those problem customers, as I saw you smile when you talked about it yourself.
Great for you, because what better way, I think, to just illustrate and walk the walk to your people, your workers, than to say, you know what, I'm a spiritual person, so God will provide you with someone else if you let someone go who's toxic. But just to live that, to show how you value your workers more than you do potentially the revenue.
They always give me a hard time. They always call me grandma. And they always
grandma, not grandpa.
Yeah, they always call me grandma abuela for my Latin American workers, because like I always say, be careful. Everybody knows that I never would ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do. And when you do good work and you have good workers, the work's going to come to you. So if you get rid of somebody that's a problem, then, It'll come. But
Exactly.
so far so good.
This is right below the bullet point here is coming up. I have to ask you about your 3 a.m. roofing start time example. So is this in an effort to beat the horrendous heat? We're starting at 3 a.m. or what is that in Atlanta?
It's really goes back to
Can I
the,
jump in for a quick
of
second?
course.
So I want to jump in and share this first, Kerry. So there's a risk factor that we know is tied to heightening suicide, ideation or suicidal thoughts, and has a link to taking your life by suicide. It's job demand. And that is what roofing is, right? It's high job demand. The other one that I don't think many realize is that environmental, such as heat, also has a tie to heightened suicidal ideation, taking your life by suicide. So when Scott starts to share this story, I think it's a really nice story to just remind there are some conditions in our workplaces that we cannot change. So how can we change the way we are showing up, leading with kindness for our people? And this, I think, is a perfect example.
Yeah. So what I'll do if I'm looking at a job and I'm bidding a job, I'll first of all ask my crew, the people that are going to be on the job with me. This job is probably going to look to go in July. And we know the weather is brutal in July. And it's a particular type of job, say a tear off or anything that's really challenging. I said, what do you guys think about if I talk to the owner that we can get started at 3 a.m. under the lights? And the reason this is important that I ask them first before I bid, because they have life commitments, they have family commitments, they have vacations. And so I ask them first. That's one thing. And the other thing that's good that comes out of it is they realize that I'm looking out for their well-being. None of us, we don't necessarily want to be at a job at 3 a.m., but we also don't want to be on a job at noon in 120, 130 degrees on the roof. And I make them they're part of the team. Not I make them, like they simply are part of the team. I couldn't do it without all these people. And if I get the okay, I will ask the owner. And sometimes if it's in an area that has residents or something, like there's different noise ordinances that we can't do it. But if we can, they appreciate it and it's a better work environment. It's a safer work environment. But the other thing is if we find out that we can't do it, it's like I mentioned a little earlier, they know that I'm interested in their well-being, that I want them working in that heat. And let's just say we can't get started at 3 a.m. Then when I bid a project, I'm adding hours because I want there to be more rest time. I want us to make sure that every foreman knows Powerade, Gatorade, water, ice, that we're never short on that. And that, again, if there's a break, like we know what we need to do for that particular day, and we take breaks and we make sure that everybody's okay. Because if people get sick and fall out, then they're not going to be there the next day, and that's a problem as well. And so I don't even want that possibility.
And I think, did you say this, that the other thing is if the job is able to start at 3 a.m., what does that mean for the workday?
We're usually done by about noon. It's still a normal workday.
So it's not like you're taking advantage and working until 6 p.m. then, right?
No,
It's
we're still
meant to-
smart.
Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of times, at least in my industry, like you have a lot of the dirtiest parts are first thing in the morning, whether it's tear off or anything like that. And so the worst part before it gets really hot is it's nice to have that past you.
How wonderful to walk the walk. And I'm sure there are contractors listening. Like you said, they may be listening, Colleen, and saying, my gosh, we're a 200 million a year company, but wait a minute, maybe if we break this down, we can do this and make it happen at our size firm. I feel like that as I interview people on this topic, I feel like that's the choke point of like warehouse projects that used to be 12 to 15 months and now they're have to be done in 9 months or 7 months. And I'm thinking to hear you stand up for your people and be willing to have that conversation with a project owner. Do you feel like both of you, that's something that needs to be happening more because we can't just accept then the next year it'll be 8 months or 6 months. And then I feel like that's just exacerbating the whole culture of safety or the lack thereof.
I don't want to speak for you, but what I would say is that it's the risk of potentially losing because And I think that's what's happening, right? That's the cycle. If I say no as a business owner, we need 8 months, but they want 6. I think that's the challenge, right? For these organizations, but somebody else behind us will get it. But I all that to say, I respect what's going on, but sometimes it's worth the risk to lose the job.
Some of the best are the jobs I didn't get. Some of the best decisions. You have to be smart. A lot of times when people will look at that dollar amounts or look, sometimes people will stretch way above their means, and it's okay to take little jobs a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. But if all of a sudden you get a job that's 3 times, you have the potential of getting a job that's 3 times the size that you've ever done, and you don't think that's going to affect your mental well-being or your employees' mental well-being, it certainly is. And so it may seem like a nice shiny object because of the dollar amounts or plenty of hours for your workers, but the workers working long 16-hour days, if you're ever going to do that, the biggest thing that I could say, again, like at the beginning, of dropping the ego and talking to your employees, talking to your team members about this. Okay, we have this possibility. We don't necessarily have the job, but I'm looking into potentially bidding the job, but this is what it's going to mean to you and your family and the sacrifices. Some people might be interested in that and say, you know what? Yeah, that sounds like that could be a good overtime, good money, everything like that. And you don't want to take that away from them, but you need to keep them in the line of communication. You can't just say, we have this. It should take normally 12 months. You got to get it done in 8 months. Go for it. And I'll be on vacation. You can't do that. You have to have the communications with everybody. And that results in less turnover.
That makes total sense. And Colleen, just we'll watch our time tick by. I could talk to you guys all day. This is awesome, but I don't want to forget to ask you, because really kindness is just it seems like the theme that undergirds your public speaking engagements. And why kindness and why now with kindness? How does kindness have a value that's ever increasing as we go through life? Why now?
Yeah, so I think there's a stat I'm going to probably repeat a little bit, but I think I want to keep it to the workplace because I still believe this is our big workplace opportunity. It's this untapped resource that every single one of us has in front of us, but we continue to overlook it because we think it's too basic. But at the end of the day, there is a count for work-related suicides. We don't talk about those. We just talk about suicides as a whole, but there are suicides that are tied to work. I teased some up when I was chatting with Scott just a few minutes ago about high job demand, about environmental conditions. There is, probably over 15 of these risk factors that are tied to suicide. And many of the times, either companies are going to continue to ignore them because they don't know what to do. It seems like too hard to do it. Or they're going to slowly pick away at it, which I 100% appreciate. And so all that to say, because we consistently go after something that's so big, something that potentially will cost us money, kindness costs us nothing. And so for those individuals that are sitting within that 11-year window of potentially not even seeking treatment, many of them are not going to, that's our opportunity. It's called like this moment of interruption. It's this like mental break, saying things like, hello, good morning, how are you? It says to someone, I see you, you matter. And those are 2 terrible stories that are consistently going through people's minds that aren't in a good space. And that's where it's such a simple opportunity. But with even things like cell phones and constant emojis, we're not getting at the heart of eye contact and simple gestures with each other that, again, can interrupt someone's thought process. And that's not just me saying that, that's also suicide survivors that have said that's what saved me. And so that to me is the why. To me, it's to help us tackle some of these factors in our workplaces like job demand, heat, that we can't change, but we can certainly change the way we show up. And that is by leading with this kind act. What can I do to show people that they matter?
Wow. This has been so awesome. We've been with Dr. Colleen Saringer and with Scott Satory, and we're talking about workforce kindness. as a strategy, as a movement of the heart that results in risk management and keeps people healthy and happy and showing up and wanting to be there and helping them be more alert about their coworkers and just preventing any situation that would keep them from going home at the end of the day. And I just so appreciate both of you being willing to talk to this topic and articulate the value of kindness. Any closing thoughts? Thank you so much for just spending time with us on this episode.
Yeah, I think the only closing thought that I would add is Scott said it in the beginning, but again, I'm not sure if it came out as clear as I think it's important to say. When he started his business, he really took a minute to reflect on the way he was treated in the past and what was he not willing to stand for going forward. There were other things in play, right? Like he was a small business. He didn't have all this funding. He funded himself. It's not like he had millions of dollars that he was he had so little to start with. All that to say, the fact that he stopped and really turned the finger in and asked himself. We are so quick to look externally, but we forget to ask, what role do I play? What role can I play? And I think that's just such a big opportunities for leaders going forward. Because again, I think that was the biggest thing for Scott, is that prior to opening, he was like, what am I not willing to deal with ever again? Which means I'm not bringing it to my workplace either. So that's just the last thing I wanted to say. It does start internally before we can start to turn the finger externally.
Absolutely, Scott. Anything else you'd like to add? Or
I think a lot of the guys out there will agree with me by saying it's important to let your wife have the last word.
see, again, you have demonstrated your intelligence in multiple facets today, but that is just another one. Colleen and Scott, I'm thankful that you're with us today. And this will be a message that we'll continue to share throughout January and February, which will be Construction News and Review Magazine's overall salute to physical and mental health, job site well-being and safety. And certainly we'll enjoy educating our Build America podcast listeners as well. But thank you both very much for being with us today on Build America. I appreciate you.
Thank you.